Hello! This time we are going to tell you about the regional and local budget expenses. Before the analysis, it's important to mention one problem. The average expenses of the regions will be somewhat overestimated compared to the real ones, while the expenses of the local budgets will be slightly underestimated. This is due to the fact that the three Russian regions, Moscow, St. Petersburg and Sevastopol, refer both to the constituent entities of the Russian Federation and municipalities. But in the budget reporting, all the expenses are shown as expenses at the regional level, and it's impossible to change it. The expenses of these cities at the local level in the budget reporting are not specified. And we are talking about large amounts. The expenses of these three constituent entities make up 24% of all the regional and local expenses of the budget system of Russia. And it's important to keep these facts in mind when we continue to analyze the expenses of the Russian budget system. First, we will specify the average level of the regional budget expenses in 2017, including the regional and local budgets, and the budgets of the territory of the compulsory medical insurance funds. It amounted to $1,380 per capita. The differentiation in the level of expenses as well as revenues is high, from $645 in the Republic of Dagestan to $11,200 in the Chukotka Autonomous Region. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that in many indices the Chukotka Autonomous Region has a leading position in budget expenses. It has nothing to do with the idea that it's some kind of a fantastic place. On the contrary, it's a territory with severe climatic conditions and low population density. The Chukotka has a population density of 0.07 person per square kilometer. Now compare it with the population density in Alaska, 0.4 person per square kilometer, that is almost 6 times higher. It's natural that the provision of state and municipal services is very expensive for the budget. Now we are going to consider budget expenses at the regional and local levels. Education is the first largest group of expenses. This group of expenses amounts to $1,380 per capita. School education is the main item of expenditures. $155 per capita is spent on education. The main part of expenses are incurred by the local level. For the local budgets, the schooling expenses make up 26% of all the budget expenses. Preschool education is the second major expenditure item. $85 is spent on it, while $70 of which is spent by the local budgets. The additional education of children is another important item of expenditure. These are various hobby groups, workshops, and so on. For these purposes, $25 is spent, and again $20 of which is spent by the local budgets. All the expenses on education make up half of the total budget expenses of local authorities. For the regions, the most important expenditure item is the secondary vocational education for 2 or 3 years. $25 per capita is spent on funding colleges. These expenses are incurred from regional budgets. It's worth mentioning that more than 50% of expenses in education refer to the payment of salaries. For example, in 2017 in Russia, the average salary of school teachers was about $7,200 a year or $600 a month. Salaries differ much depending on regions. The minimum salary for teachers in the Republic of Dagestan was $330, and the maximum salary in the Chukotka Autonomous Region was $1,500. Healthcare is the second largest group of expenses. $330 per capita is spent on it in the budget system, $280 of which is spent at the regional level. $80 is the expenses of the regional budget, $200 is the expenses of the territory compulsory health insurance funds. In fact, healthcare expenses are absent at the local level. There are also federal budget expenses. They are about $50 per capita and include the financing of large medical clinics that primarily serve as research centers. Financing science is the federal responsibility. It's almost everything that can be learned about healthcare financing from the budget. The thing is that only the sphere of healthcare uses the so-called two-channel funding. It doesn't fit into the overall budget model. Therefore, more detailed information on healthcare funding can be found not in the budget, but in other documents, for example, in the program of the state guarantees of the state funding medical services to citizens. For information, we should also note that the share of salaries of medical workers is high in healthcare expenses. It accounts for 60 to 70% of all the healthcare expenses. For example, in 2017, in Russia, the average salary of a doctor with a higher degree was $11,640 a year, or $970 a month. In the regional context, the level of monthly salaries varies from $550 in the Republic of Kalmykia to $2,570 in the Chukotka Autonomous Region. National economy is the third largest group of expenses. $270 per capita is spent on the needs of the national economy, while $220 is spent by the regions and $50 is spent by the municipalities. Almost half of this amount is spent on construction, repair and maintenance of roads, which is $120. $50 is the expenses for transport services for the public. At the regional and local levels, this is first of all the compensation to transport enterprises for the transportation of privileged categories of citizens, who are serviced free of charge or at reduced tariffs. It should be noted that the expenses aimed at the building new metro station in Moscow are high. The highest level of national economy expenses are in the Chukotka Autonomous Region, which is $2,900 per capita, and the lowest ones are in the Republic of North Ossetia-Alania, which is $75. Social policy is the fourth group of expenses. In 2017, $190 per capita was spent for this purpose. The main expenses are borne by the regions, namely $150. More than half of the social policy expenses, namely $100, is the social security of the population. This expenditure item includes a large number of allowances, benefits and compensations to various groups of population in need of state support. People with disabilities, veterans, people affected by the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and others. The amount of specific allowances is not very large, but in total it forms a large item of the budget expenditures. The public utilities sector is the fifth group of expenses. On average, in Russia, such expenses amount to $130 per capita. 60% of the expenses are borne by the regions, 40% of them are borne by the municipalities. The expenses of the public utilities sector include three items. Housing includes first of all the expenses of resettlement and dilapidated and emergency housing. In 2017, $40 per capita was spent on these purposes. Utilities of the expenses aimed at providing the population with water, electricity, removal and processing of household wastes, and others. Last year, expenses were also about $40. Landscaping, which includes many elements of the expenses aimed at creating comfortable living conditions. Here, lighting and gardening are the most expensive of them. The cost of 2017 was $50. This is almost 7 times higher than the average in Russia. Compared to the average expenses, landscaping in Moscow is very high, which is $370 per capita. It's almost 7 times higher than the average amount in Russia. The sixth group of expenses is the national scale expenses. The expenses in this area are of both the regions and municipalities amount to $40 per capita in the total amount of $80. Approximately half of this amount is spent to ensure the work of the regional and municipal authorities. The other half includes a variety of expenses related to public administration, primarily the maintenance of state and municipal property. As a rule, the highest level of expenses is in the Chukotka Autonomous Region, which is $670 per capita, and the lowest level is in the Chuvash Republic, which is $35. The seventh group of expenses belongs to the expenses for the cultural affairs. They are equal to $50 and are implemented equally $25 to the regions and municipalities. The regional authorities usually finance theaters, regional museums and festivals. At the local level, most of the expenses are for libraries, clubs and houses of culture and municipal museums. Again, the Chukotka Autonomous Region is the financing leader with $300 per capita if we compare it to other regions. The lowest expenses for the cultural affairs are in the Republic of Dagestan with $18. The eighth group of expenses is the physical education and sports. The total amount of funding is $30 per capita, $20 of which is the expenses of the regions. Largely, these are the expenses of the top-level sports, that is, the training of participants for Russian and international competitions. Municipalities finance most sports. The average amount of the expenses of the local budget is $10. The last group of expenses that we will consider is the service of the public debt. In the previous part, we noted that the largest amount of the public debt falls on the federal budget. So, the federal budget pays most of the interest on loans too. Out of $100 of expenses for the Russian budget system, the federal level accounts for $85, and the regional budget accounts for $13, and the local budget accounts for $2. Among the regions, the best indicator is in the Sakhalin region and the city of Sevastopol. Due to the lack of the public debt, this region do not spend budget funds to service the debt. The largest amount is paid by the Magadan region. It is $130 per capita. At this point, our story about the expenses of the regional and local budgets in the Russian Federation is over. More detailed and accurate information can be found on the website budsis.com. In the next part of our cycle, we will look at how the budget process is organized in the Russian Federation. See you next time!